Hey everyone, and welcome back for another deep dive.
I'm excited to be here.
Today we're going to be talking about research designs.
Yeah, research designs.
I know that it can seem like a really intimidating topic,
Yeah, for sure.
but we're hoping to kind of demystify it a little bit today and make it more applicable to what we're doing every day as practitioners.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's kind of like, when you're baking a cake, you wouldn't bake it without a recipe.
Right. You need some sort of plan.
You need a plan. You need to know what ingredients to put in, when, and how much.
And what order.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So our research design is kind of like that recipe for behavior change.
I like that. Yeah.
So one of the simplest and most common designs that we'll see is called the AB design. So it's like with grades,
Yeah, just like that.
A and B.
But in this case, A stands for baseline.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we started.
So it's like a snapshot of where the behavior is before we start doing anything?
Exactly.
Gotcha.
And then B stands for the intervention. What we're actually going to be doing to change the behavior.
So we take the baseline and then we implement an intervention and we see what happens.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so that seems pretty simple and straightforward.
It is pretty simple.
Is that it, or is there more to it?
Well, there are some limitations to that.
Yeah.
One of the big limitations is it doesn't really tell us for sure that it was our intervention that caused the change.
Okay, so there could be other things that are happening at the same time that are impacting the behavior.
Exactly.
So can you give me an example of that?
Sure. So let's say you're working with a movie theater
Okay.
and you're trying to increase their profits.
Right.
And you assume, like a lot of people do, that, increasing ticket sales is going to really bump up the profits.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But what if I told you that it's actually the concession sales that are the real moneymaker?
Really?
Yes. So all that popcorn and soda,
Interesting.
that's what's really bringing in the big bucks.
Huh. So even if they increase ticket sales, if they're not also focusing on the concession sales, they're not really maximizing their profits.
Exactly.
Wow. Okay, so is there a way to account for that in our research design? Like, is there a way to be sure that it was our intervention that made the difference?
Yeah, there are some other designs that can be more helpful for that.
Okay.
So one of those is called the ABAB design.
More letters.
More letters. I know it seems complicated,
Yeah.
but it's really not that bad.
Yeah.
So remember how we talked about that AB design can't really tell us for sure if it was our intervention that caused the change?
Right.
So the ABAB design tries to fix that by adding a reversal phase.
A reversal. So we go back to the beginning.
Well, not quite the beginning.
Okay.
So after you've done your intervention, you've introduced that B phase, you see a change.
Right.
You would then remove the intervention
Okay.
and go back to that baseline phase, the A phase.
Gotcha.
And so what we're looking for is to see if the behavior goes back to how it was before.
Okay, so it's like if we take away the intervention and the behavior goes back to how it was before,
Yeah.
that tells us that our intervention was probably what was causing the change.
Exactly. Yeah.
I see.
And then that second B is just we're reintroducing the intervention.
Oh, okay.
Just to make sure that it wasn't a fluke.
So we're checking our work, making sure that it really was our intervention.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So with the ABAB design, we're basically introducing the intervention, taking it away, and then bringing it back again just to make sure that it's really working.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense.
It's a pretty powerful design.
It does seem pretty powerful.
But it's not always practical.
What do you mean?
So sometimes it's just not feasible or ethical
Okay,
to remove an intervention,
I see.
especially if it's something that's really important for the person's safety or well-being.
Yeah, like you wouldn't want to take away an intervention that was preventing someone from hurting themselves,
Exactly.
right? Just to see if it was really working.
You got it. Yeah.
So is there a way to get around that? Are there other designs that we can use if we can't do a reversal?
Absolutely.
Okay.
There are other designs that don't require that reversal phase.
Okay.
And one of the most common ones is called the multiple baseline design.
Multiple baseline.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this is a really cool design.
Okay. Tell me more about it.
So instead of reversing the intervention, we're going to stagger the introduction of the intervention.
Stagger.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So we might be looking at multiple different behaviors or multiple different settings or even multiple different people.
Okay.
And we're going to introduce the intervention at different times for each of those.
So like we're rolling it out slowly.
Exactly.
I'm starting to get it.
Yeah.
So can you give me an example of how that might work in practice?
Sure. So one of our sources had a really great example of a safety program that was implemented in a food manufacturing plant.
Okay.
So they used a multiple baseline design across different departments.
Oh, okay.
So they started with the wrapping department. And they introduced the safety program there, but they kept collecting baseline data in the makeup department.
Oh, that's interesting. So they were like comparing the two.
Exactly.
Okay.
And what they found was that the wrapping department's safety performance improved.
Okay.
But the makeup department stayed the same.
Because they hadn't implemented the intervention yet.
Exactly.
Oh,
And
wow.
then when they introduced the program in the makeup department, they saw the same improvement in safety behavior.
Wow. So that's really cool because you can visually see the impact of the intervention as it's rolled out.
Exactly.
It's like those lights on a soundboard.
Yeah.
They go off one by one as the music gets louder.
Yeah, I like that analogy.
So you can really see the pattern.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's a really powerful design.
That is super cool.
And you can use it for individuals too, not just groups.
Oh, okay. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so there was another study that was in our source material that used a multiple baseline design with a college football team. And what they were looking at was the impact of publicly posting players' goals for specific skills during practice.
So instead of changing the whole practice routine, they focused on like one specific skill at a time.
Exactly.
Gotcha.
So they were staggering the introduction of that public posting of goals across like accurate reads, drops, tackles.
Okay.
And what they found was that they saw improvements in each of those skills when the public posting was introduced.
And did they see those improvements like carry over into games?
They did.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so it showed that it wasn't just improving their performance in practice, but it was actually generalizing to the games as well.
Wow. So this multiple baseline design seems super flexible.
It is super flexible. You can apply it to all sorts of things.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But I'm guessing there are some things that we need to keep in mind to make sure that we're using it correctly.
You're exactly right.
Like what?
So there are 3 key conditions
Okay.
that we need to be aware of when we're using a multiple baseline design.
I'm ready to give them to me.
All right, so the first one is that our variables need to be independent,
Independent meaning.
meaning that one variable shouldn't be influencing the other.
So we need to choose things that are like distinct from each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's number 1. What's number 2?
Number 2 is that we need to be collecting data on all of our variables at the same time.
So even though we're not introducing the intervention to all of them at the same time, we're still taking data
That's right.
on all of them.
It's called concurrent measurement.
It's concurrent measurement. Okay.
And that's really important because it allows us to make those comparisons.
I see. So we can see how the data is changing or not changing
Exactly.
at the same time for all of the variables.
You got it.
Okay, cool. So we got independent variables, concurrent measurement. What's number 3?
Number 3 is documentation.
Oh, documentation.
Yes.
So important.
So important.
What kind of documentation?
So we want to be documenting any changes that are happening in the environment that could be affecting the behavior.
Ah, so those pesky extraneous variables.
Exactly.
We've got to keep track of those.
Yep.
Okay, so we've got our independent variables, we've got concurrent measurement, and we've got documentation.
Those are the 3 keys to a successful multiple baseline design.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about A-B designs, we've talked about A-B designs, and now we've talked about multiple baseline designs. Is there anything else we need to know before we wrap up this part of our deep dive?
There's one more design that we should touch on.
Okay.
It's not used quite as frequently in practice, but it's still an important one to know about.
I'm ready. What is it?
It's called the alternating treatments design.
Alternating treatments. What are that?
So basically with this design, we're comparing 2 or more different interventions.
Oh, so we're seeing which one's more effective.
Exactly.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Sounds like we're doing a little competition.
A little behavioral battle royale.
Yes.
I like it.
And so this is helpful when we can't do those longer reversal phases that we talked about earlier.
It's exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. So if it's not feasible or ethical
Okay.
to remove an intervention.
Like if it was something that was keeping someone safe.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. We could use this alternating treatments design to compare different interventions really quickly and see which one's working best.
Okay, so it's like we're trying different keys to see which one opens the lock the fastest.
I love that analogy.
So can you give me an example of how this might be used in real life?
Sure. So one of our sources had an example of a study that was done with college students,
Okay.
and they were trying to figure out the best way to motivate students to do informational interviews for clients.
Informational interviews.
Yeah.
I can see why they might need some extra motivation for that.
They did.
Yeah.
So they tested out 3 different incentive systems.
Okay, what were they?
So they had the existing system that they were already using, they had a group contingency,
Okay.
and then they had an individual monetary incentive.
Oh, I bet that was the winner.
It was. The individual monetary incentive was definitely the most effective at getting those students to complete their interviews.
So it's like a win-win. The students are happier and they're getting their work done.
Exactly.
Cool.
Yeah.
So we've got a lot of different research designs to choose from.
We do.
We've got our ABA, ABAB, multiple baseline, and now alternating treatments.
That's right.
Like we're real behavioral detectives now.
We are.
Awesome.
Yeah.
But do you have any final tips for our listeners before we wrap up this part of our deep dive?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to remember is that research designs aren't just about collecting data.
Okay.
They're really about using that data to make better decisions for our clients.
To help them be more successful.
Exactly.
Fair
And
thought.
don't be afraid to experiment.
Okay.
Try out different designs, see what works best for you and the people you're working with.
Yeah.
It's all about finding the right tool for the job.
So it's like being a handyman. You don't want to use a hammer for every job.
Exactly.
Sometimes you need a screwdriver.
Right.
Or a wrench.
And sometimes you need all three,
Yeah.
but you got to know which one to use when.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So research designs are like the tools in our ABA toolbox.
Absolutely.
I love that analogy.
And the more tools we have in our toolbox,
The better prepared we are
the better we can be.
to help our clients be successful.
Exactly.
Awesome. Well, this has been super helpful. I feel like I have a much better understanding of research designs now.
I'm glad to hear that.
It's not just about being a scientist. It's about being a better practitioner.
That's what it's all about.
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts for our listeners before we wrap up this deep dive into research designs?
Yeah, I would just say, don't go it alone.
Okay, what do you mean?
There's so many resources out there that can help you learn more about research designs and how to use them.
Like what?
So our source material actually mentioned a really interesting field called Organizational Behavior Management, or OBM.
OBM.
Yeah,
I've never heard of that.
it's really cool.
Tell me more.
It's basically applying ABA principles in the workplace.
Oh, that's interesting. So instead of working with individuals, we're working with like entire organizations.
Exactly.
Wow, that sounds fascinating.
It is.
What do they do?
So it's all about improving performance, boosting morale, creating a more positive and productive work environment.
Sign me up.
Yeah, it's really cool.
So where can our listeners learn more about OBM?
We'll be sure to include some links in the show notes to some great resources on OBM
Awesome.
and research designs as well.
Perfect. And hey, if any of you out there have tried using any of these research designs in your own practice, we'd love to hear about your experiences.
Yeah.
What worked? Well, what were some challenges that you faced? Share your stories with us on social media or through our website,
Yeah, we'd love to hear from you.
because we're all in this together.
We are.
And learning from each other is one of the best ways to grow.
Absolutely.
So we're like a community of behavioral detectives always looking for clues and better ways to solve these behavioral mysteries.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the next time you're facing a tricky situation, don't be afraid to put on your detective hat.
Exactly.
Choose the right research design, gather your data, and use those insights to make a real difference.
Because at the end of the day, it's all about helping our clients reach their full potential.
Well said. I love that.
Yeah.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Deep Dive.
Thanks for joining us, everyone.
Keep learning, keep experimenting, and keep making the world a more behaviorally savvy place.
We'll see you next time.
Bye.